now.
So we are live now.
Yes, we've just gone live.
Good evening, everybody, and to all of you who are watching from outside. Welcome to the planning meeting for this evening, Planning North. And we'll start with apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, we do. We have apologies from councillors Andrew Baldwin and Andrew Baldwin and Godfrey Newman. And Councillor Walters is having technical troubles and might not be able to come either.
Let us know if you joined, will you? Right. Linda, do you want to do your legal bit now? I'm never quite sure on the agenda where it comes, but if we go now, if that's all right.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Because I find that I can hear you, but it's quite quiet. But can everyone hear me?
I can. Yes.
Okay.
There are a few things to cover with this meeting, and there's the usual procedures, but we're quite familiar with them now. So some of the members of the public and the parish councillors will be making representations, and they will be held in a waiting room by the host until it is their turn to speak. If a member of the committee has an interest where they cannot speak or vote, the host will put them in a waiting area and return them to the meeting at the end of the item. Of course, there's only one item on, so I think that's all been dealt with. If members of the committee wish to participate in the discussion, press the blue raise hand icon in the blue Zoom bar to indicate you wish to speak, and keep your microphone on mute until it is your turn. When the votes are taken by roll call, members will be ready to unmute just before their name is called out, and then mute yourself again. If you lose connection, you can re-enter the meeting via Zoom, but members will not be able to vote on any items they have missed, so please abstain. There's a few things in relation to this application. One is that if it is required to speak, for members to discuss confidential items relating to the applicant's finances, then we will pass a resolution. The committee will need to pass a resolution to exclude the public and press from that discussion. The discussion will then take place in private with the members only, and at the conclusion then it will go into public session so that they can record their decision in public. The head of the Democratic Services Officer will read out the wording of the resolution, and then the chairman will move that in accordance with the wording, she will move that we will go into confidential session, and you will need to vote on that. I understand that feelings are running high in some of the speakers, not members necessarily, but the speakers. And just to say that anything that's said in a local government meeting, it's not like being a member of parliament. You're not covered by anything that is slanderous or, in other words, can give rise to legal proceedings. So should anything like that happen, head of Democratic Services will cut off the person concerned, and then we will move on without hearing what they were about to say. We will not be able to listen to it. Just so that you know, anything that's said about another person, unless you can prove it is true, can be liable to proceedings under slander or even libel. So if members of the public would bear that in mind. I think that was all you wanted me to cover, Chair, was it?
Yes, I think so. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, while we're at it, were there any questions that anybody had for the Legal Services Department on this? Because it's slightly unusual. Right, I see there are no questions, so we'll
Chairman,
move straight on to the minutes. May
sorry,
I?
Chairman, to interrupt. Can I just say
Yes.
that the members of the public are in the waiting room, and if they're not listening to it on YouTube, they may not have heard what was just said about saying things which are inappropriate. So it might be worth just very briefly saying that again before they're invited to speak.
Before they're invited to speak?
Yeah, it's just because they were in the waiting room, so they might not have heard that the statement about them not being covered, like in Parliament, the libelous.
Okay. You'll do that, will you, Linda?
Yes, Liz, if you could let me know when it's appropriate for me to advise the members of the public, then I'll say it again. Or shall I say it now? Are they available now?
No, I'll let them in at the beginning of the item. Maybe just very quickly sum up after Councillor Kitchen has invited them to speak.
And they all come in at the same time, do they?
Yes, they all come in at the same time before the presentation. Yes.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Move on with the meeting now then. The minutes of the last meeting, I'm assuming that you've accepted them as a correct record, as I see there are no queries. Right, so deal with that. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No.
I do, Chairman.
Announcement. Oh, sorry, Councillor Vickers, you just put your hand up. Yeah.
Yes, yes, Chairman. I'd like to declare an interest as a past trustee of the Shipley Windmill. I was a trustee from 1991 to 2003, but I haven't been a trustee since then. Thank you.
Liz,
Thank you very much, Councillor Vickers.
Liz.
Yes.
It's gone.
Yes, I'm here.
I was a trustee as well, but I can't remember when. Even forgotten last time I was a trustee, but I have been a trustee some 10 years ago, I think.
But you're not a trustee now?
Oh, no, no.
No, okay. That's fine. Canto.
Hello there, just a quick point of order.
Councillor Minto, your hand up.
Just a quick point of order. I think someone's asked for where the hand is now, and just to confirm to everyone, it's now in the reactions tab, if that's supportive of anyone. They can't find it. The Councillor Allen answered the same question, but just in case that helps people.
It's moved, hasn't it? Yeah, okay. They're not so easy to see, these, as a waving hand.
No,
okay, so we'll now move on
select the correct one, obviously.
Yes, right. Now move on to appeals, which are just for noting, unless anybody had anything that they wish to say. No, so we'll go to the main reasons that we're here this evening, which is items 6 and 7, and the members of the public will be coming in now, I believe. Will you let me know when they're in? Now move on to appeal.
They're all in the meeting now.
They're all in, thank you very much. Well, if we could ask legal services to explain, please now, Linda, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Just so that the members of the public are aware, in local government meetings, they're not like the Houses of Parliament, whereby you can say whatever you like about anyone and be privileged. You're not privileged in local government sessions. So if you could consider anything that you're going to say about the applicant or anything that might not be appropriate, do be careful, because you are liable to legal proceedings if you do so. Just bear that in mind when you're making your presentation. So I hope that will help you.
Right, thank you very much for that. Right, we'll now move on, and I think it's Amy Richardson, you're presenting this, so just like to explain that we will be taking items 6 and 7 together for presentation, but when it comes to the vote, they will be taken as separate votes. Just so you all understand that. Right, Amy, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, thank you.
I'm guessing so. Okay. So Members will recall that the applications for planning permission and listed building consent relating to the engine house at Kings Mill, which is highlighted green on the plan, were originally presented to Planning Committee North back in December last year. And at this meeting, members resolved to defer consideration of both applications to allow officers to seek further financial information in order to demonstrate that the proposals could secure the long-term repair and maintenance of the Grade 2-star listed building known as Kings Mill. So since that December meeting, further information has been provided by the applicants, and as outlined at paragraph 1.2 of the committee reports and as provided within the confidential appendices. So the additional information relates to public access now being provided to the windmill as part of the Heritage Open Day schemes, which is a nationally recognised organisation promoting access to special and historic buildings and locations. And then in addition, the applicants have provided additional financial information, which includes mortgage illustrations and clarity in respect of the availability of a mortgage and also other funding options available to them. So just to make members aware that since drafting the reports, additional letters of objection have been received in respect of the applications, and these raise issues relating to and summarised as the financial information not being made available to members of the public for their consideration and appraisal, the viability of the scheme and the suitability of an interest-only mortgage, the lack of contact by officers of former trustees of the charitable trust who members of the public are saying that are likely to seek to work with the owners of the mill to come up with a long-term solution for its repair and maintenance. The availability of funding if the mill was run by a charitable trust compared to if it's run privately. That the Heritage Open Day scheme is only likely to provide access for one day a year. That the loss of the engine house prevents an understanding of the history of the mill and preventing the mill from operating on windless days. Also in respect of a lack of details relating to the Section 106 agreement and the likely impact that this could have on future lending or mortgage options, depending on any restrictions imposed. The requirement for the council to be satisfied that the scheme is viable before planning permission is granted, the loss of one of the best examples of a potentially working smock mill in Sussex, and also finally interference with the public right of way which runs adjacent to the site and which can be seen on this plan. It's running north-south. So to quickly refresh members on the proposal, so application DC 20-0321 seeks full planning permission for the change of use of the engine house attached to Kings Mill to provide a 2-bedroom dwelling, and application DC 20-0322 seeks listed building consent for the works required to facilitate the change of use. So the engine within the engine house, as outlined in red, is to be retained within the building with new partition walls installed to create the bedrooms and bathrooms. So in terms of the external works proposed, limited new openings are to be provided, which are mainly in this location here, with new windows, doors, installed to the south and west elevations in the same positions as the existing, and also the building will be reclad. So as mentioned, since the December meeting of Planning Committee North, further information has been provided by the applicant as outlined at paragraph 1.2 of the committee reports. And this includes mortgage illustrations and clarity in respect of the availability of a mortgage and other funding options available to the applicants. The applicants have also advised that they now intend to provide public access to the windmill on Heritage Open Days, which didn't form part of the previous considerations in December. So as set out in the committee reports, officers consider that the proposed development would not result in an adverse impact on the character or appearance of the windmill or the wider area, or on neighbouring amenity or the highway network, with no other unacceptable impacts identified. It's considered by officers that the benefits of conversion to residential use and associated repair and ongoing maintenance to the windmill with some public access secured through a legal agreement outweigh the harm to the special interest of the listed building. So the proposed conversion will be limited to the engine house only and not to the windmill itself, and this will avoid alteration or disruption of the smock mill and retain the possibility of it being brought back into use in the future. So the recommendation of officers is to grant planning permission for the change of use, subject to appropriate conditions as outlined in the report, and also the completion of a Section 106 agreement to, amongst other issues, include provision of public access to the windmill, and also a Grampian style clause requiring confirmation of funding being secured prior to commencement of development. And in respect of the financial information and consideration of it as part of this application, in this case, the financial information is a consideration given that the change of use of the building will directly finance the restoration and ongoing maintenance of that Grade 2 star listed windmill. And this would be secured, include a secured mortgage option or confirmation of funds from another source. And if that through the Section 106, and if that clause can't be met, then obviously the development can't be implemented. And then in respect of the listed building consent, it's recommended that that is granted subject to appropriate conditions as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have the screen back again, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, well, we have 3 speakers. The first 3 are Jen, and so the first one is Colin Kenny.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Kenny.
Right, what I have to say is this is about Shipley Windmill, Kingsmill, Kingsland, Shipley. I'm objecting to this application to convert the engine house into living accommodation, as would make it almost impossible to restore and operate the mill in the future with all the equipment in full working order. Shipley Windmill is unique. It is the youngest and largest windmill in Sussex. It is also, as far as I can see from the research I have done, the only windmill in England that was designed from the outset to have an auxiliary power source to enable it to grind corn when the wind was not sufficient to keep the switch turning. Many windmills installed auxiliary steam engines when suitable sized engines became available in the 1850s. However, these were add-ons to existing mills. In the mill at Shipley, which has 3 sets of stones, is a 4th pinion, which is engaged when the steam engine is to be used. This is driven from a pulley mounted on the side of the smock. A belt from the ground floor transmitted power to the pulley from a large pulley wheel on the ground floor. A shaft ran through the wall of the mill with another large pulley wheel outside in the engine house. All of this machinery is original except for the large pulley wheel inside the mill on the ground floor. This had been damaged and a replacement was made. Yeah. When the steam engine was to be used,
You're muted.
Oh, I'm frightfully sorry. I thought I'd unmuted.
No, you got muted in the middle there. Would you like to go back a sentence?
Okay. In the mill at Shipley, which has 3 sets of stones, is a 4th pinion which is engaged when the steam engine is to be used. This is driven from a pulley mounted on the side of the smock. A belt from the ground floor transferred power to the pulley on a large pulley wheel on the ground floor. A shaft ran through the wall of the mill with another large pulley wheel on the outside of the engine in the engine house. All of this machinery is original except for the large pulley wheel inside the mill on the ground floor. This had been damaged and a replacement was obtained. When the steam engine was to be used, the wind shaft was jacked forward so that the brake wheel was out of engagement with the wallower. In the original installation, the steam engine was a portable steam engine which was located in the main part of the engine house. There was a counter shaft that took the drive from the engine and related it to the large pulley wheel on the outside of the mill.
2 minutes.
Also, in this section, I'm sorry?
Can I just ask, did you give him an extra few seconds for the time he was muted?
Yes, I did.
You did, okay. Yes. Your time is up, therefore, Mr. Kenny.
Let me just say the following. Both the mill itself and the internal machinery are listed, and to allow development of such an important local historic landmark will be a disaster.
Thank you very much. That's fine. The next speaker is Mr. Peter James. Mr.
Yes,
James,
hello, good evening. Yes, thank you very much. I've spoken before, but basically, as it stands, I'm an objector. However, I'm also a pragmatist, and I can see that most things have been answered. But what I haven't really seen is any detail on the Section 106 agreement, and I have a few concerns about that, which I really should be taken into account. Number one, the owner said he would be willing to open on Heritage Open Days, days as in plural. Well, the Heritage Open Days is actually a week's festival. So an actual minimum number of days should be stated in the 106 agreement. You can't just have it open and ambiguous. So a minimum number of days, and I urge people to make a note of that, please. Also, I notice as advised by English Heritage that they should open on Heritage Open Days, but the other great festival is run by the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings. It's a national festival called National Mills Weekend, and that's in May. And I really do think there should be one day there. So if there was one day in May and maybe a day or two in September, that would give a good opening spread throughout the year, rather than just one day when potentially the weather's a bit gloomy as well. So I urge members to make note of that as well, please. And also in the agreement as it stands says the mill should be open. Well, what does actually open mean? The owner could turn around and say, well, it's open the ground floor, so it's open. So again, it needs to be very specific, and it should say that all floors of the windmill should be open to the public. I urge members to make a note of that. What happens if the owner says he cannot open, i.e.
15 seconds left.
To lack of volunteers? That needs answering. What controls are over that? And also, if the windmill could work in the future and the sales are over the top of the accommodation, there may be a problem with insurance. How could this be answered? That's it. Thank you very much.
Well done. Perfect timing. Norman Carrick, Mr. Carrick, you're next. Also, I think joining us on video when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
As councillors, it is your duty today to ask why it should be that Historic England, Shipley Parish Council, 3 NGOs concerned with the conservation of mills and other historic buildings, and 50 local residents and members of the public from as far afield as Australia all agree that these proposals are not in the best long-term interest of Shipley Windmill. How could it be that these people, including experts with practical experience of conserving historic buildings, can all be mistaken and your officers alone could be correct in recommending it for approval? Your officers claim that it has been demonstrated that the development is financially viable and can provide the funding for the restoration and conservation works to the windmill. The financial information that has been supplied, however, makes the assumption that the new property can be let continuously from day one and that there will be no landlord's running costs for the new letting unit apart from mortgage repayments. Both of these assumptions are nonsense. If realistic figures are used instead, it is clear that in no year would the property produce the expected income to support the mill, and over 10 years it would result in a deficit on mill maintenance of some £29,000. The vital point is that this development would be irreversible, yet it cannot be viewed as a long-term solution. Imagine the situation if you allow these applications today, and then in a few years' time, the applicant comes back to you and says, unfortunately, it wasn't as easy to let the property as we expected, and the rent was not as much as we expected, and the outgoings on the property were much greater than we expected, so there wasn't any money left to spend on the mill. Please, can I have more development in order to upkeep the mill? What will you do then? The applicant complains that ownership of the mill is a burden that he cannot sustain, but were it not for his own actions in 2009, Shipley Mill would now be in excellent working order and regularly open to the public. I know that in the last few weeks, the applicants have received an approach from the windmill supporters, an informal group of interested residents of Shipley formed in June 2020 in response to these applications, seeking to work with him. I urge you to reject these applications today, and instead I ask Horsham District Council to support an alternative, sustainable, long-term future for the mill as a living, working mill open to the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carrick. The next one is Mr. Nugent, who's the agent, who I believe I'm right in saying is on video.
Good afternoon. I'm Robin Nugent, the architect for the project at the King's Mill at Shipley. We are all privileged to live in an area where the Shipley Mill is an icon of Sussex. Kings Mill has for years been used in publicity, not only by Horsham District Council, but by the County Council as well. And the reason why we have the benefit of this mill in our presence is that it was saved by Hillier Belloc and repaired, and his successive generations have maintained it and brought it down to the current day, where it is one of the few survivors that has the potential to be put back into working order. We have produced a project with the help of the Inspector of Historic England, Alma Howell, and your own Conservation Officer, Sean Ricks. And together with the support of Kate Turner, the Planning Case Officer, we now have before us a project to provide the mill with a sustainable future. The current owners, in advancing years, want to try and provide this secure future. We now need your help to ensure that this project succeeds and that we can then pass on the mill to successive generations, so our grandchildren and their children can have the benefit that we have of seeing this beautiful mill in the Sussex countryside. In anticipation of your support, thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that. And the final speaker on this is Councillor Philip Baxter from Slinfold, Shipley Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you can hear me yet.
Yes, I think I can.
You
everyone
can. Okay. I can see a blank space where my face ought to be. I will speak quickly.
Have you pushed video?
I thought I had, certainly.
There we go.
I pushed it. There we are. Now I have. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the meeting as current chairman of Shipley Parish Council. I'm very pleased to have that opportunity.
I lost connection and I've only just been let back in the meeting. Does that mean I?
Am I to carry on speaking?
Yeah, can you just hold to make sure they've got your timing on that? Yes, 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 please do. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak tonight. There has been significant strength of opposition to the proposals, and it's been expressed at parish council meetings at which the matter has been discussed on at least 2 occasions to my recollection. The concerns principally covered 4 areas. In summary, they were the financial arrangement proposed, the effect on what is a grade 2 listed building, the effect on what local residents, visitors in particular, windmill experts know to be a community asset, and a concern that proposals as they are would not change the adoption, not be changed by the adoption of these plans. That is to say, the maintenance of the mill would not be guaranteed. The views of Shipley Parish Council were opposed because the Parish Council was not convinced of the financial model or that it presented sufficient funds over time to maintain the mill in future years. Other funding operations had been proposed, although they hadn't been adopted by the applicant, but they weren't considered. The English Heritage and Historic England in particular, and there were others, had raised objections based on their expertise with buildings of the kind that we are considering. Local residents and others having an interest had objected in the largest numbers ever to proposals for the mill in recent times because it is an asset that they want to see preserved. And maintenance of the mill as a community asset, they felt would not be changed by the proposals. We all know that Shipley Windmill lies within an historical conservation area, which includes the 12th century Knights Templar Church. It's the last smock mill in the county capable of working and ought to be maintained for the benefit of future generations. The windmill is a significant community asset, and the objections, which you'll have all read from the Parish Council, have not just come from Shipley, but they've included associations such as Historic England and the Sussex Mills Group, and the general level of interest and support for the mill reflects its importance. Now, it was felt that the future of the windmill could have been assured many years ago, but verbal financial offers were repeatedly rejected by the applicant. And I understand, or we understand, there are still financial offers available from the community today. Now, bearing all this in mind, and I'm conscious of the time, if the application were to be approved by Horsham District Council in light of the latest information, some of which Shipley Parish Council has not seen, there should be stringent conditions attached to ensure that the mill is maintained to the required standard, and indeed return to operation if it possibly can be. And in particular, it shouldn't be sold, or if it is sold, the conditions that applied to the proposals now should be held in perpetuity. Now, there were still some concerns about the finances and open days. We need to be reassured that the finances are robust and that the maintenance of the mill will be sustained and sustainable from them in future years. The figures provided indicate that after some costs are accounted for, there will be about £4,600 left per pardon me, for maintenance per year. Questions were asked about the costs of the building insurance for the new dwelling, in particular it being a house attached to what essentially is a wooden windmill. There is the question of insurance, the landlord insurance, tax that might have to be paid on rental income, and of course the costs associated with paying the mortgage. We feel that conditions attached to any planning permission ought to require set aside of an inflation-linked percentage of gross rent every year. Beg your pardon?
You've got 15 seconds to go.
I've got 20 seconds actually, thank you. It
Okay.
needs to be clear whether the gross rent would be subject to tax or not, because it makes a big difference to the funds available. And the conditions proposed in these respects need to be unambiguous so that they can be clearly understood. For example, might there be a minimum and a maximum number of open days specified? How would they and the frequency of them be defined? Will the floors of all floors of the windmill be open to the public? And essentially, would English Heritage take full responsibility for the regulatory and health and safety issues when the mill is open to the public? And thank you very much. I'll make that 5 minutes and 20 seconds. I'm sorry to overrun.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baxter. I'm quite sure that the officers have some comments they want to make on the speaker's comments. So is that going to be you, Amy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just to pick up on some of the points that the speakers have raised. So in respect of the number of opening days, in respect of the number of opening days and what floors would be available for members of the public, that could definitely be picked up through the Section 106, and it's intended that the Section 106 could include a requirement for a programme to be submitted and agreed by the council as to the number of opening days to be provided per year, and we could also include into that, into the programme, what floors were available. In terms of what else have we got? Just to make members aware that there are no works to the listed building, to the windmill itself. The works are to the engine house only, as per the amended scheme that was submitted. In terms of the windmill running on windless days, it's previously been advised by the conservation officer that there could possibly be other ways to power the windmill if wind power isn't sufficient, and that it might be that something such as like an electric motor could be installed, which would without harm to the listed building itself. So that is potentially an option in the future. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to pick up on anything else, Emma.
I think that's fine at this stage, but obviously okay, we can answer questions. Thank you.
Right, well, I come to the local members now then. Councillor Lindsay.
Thank you, Liz. This is an enabling development, the purpose of which is to generate a rental income by converting the engine house into a dwelling house, which will let to a tenant. A mortgage secured against the new dwelling house will be used to fund the engine house conversion and also to make essential repairs to the windmill. The rental income will then be used to fund the ongoing maintenance of the windmill. Overall, I have some sympathy with this scheme, which in the opinion of the Council's Conservation Officer, the benefits of the conservation of the engine house to residential use outweighs the harm to the special interests of the listed building. I also welcome the proposal to reopen to the mill to the public, but we don't really know how many days are there. However, I do have concerns that all the long-term costs involved in this project have not been clearly spelt out and necessarily taken into account, and this may affect the viability of the enabling development. Because of the confidential nature of these costs and other factors, I propose that members withdraw from the open session and discuss this in a closed session in order to clarify these costs and determine their impact.
Right, thank you, Councillor Lindsay. I'll bring the other three members in first, the other two members, before we go on to your proposal. Councillor Ian Stannard.
Thank you. I should point out that unfortunately I lost connection very briefly during the presentation of one of the speakers, so I will not vote on this, but I believe I can speak. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'm being nodded at.
Okay. I share Councillor Lindsay's concerns regarding finance. I also share the concerns of many of my constituents regarding the impact it will have upon what is a very important listed building. And I am saddened that efforts to restore the trust appear not to be willing to be engaged by the current owner. I think that's a great sadness. I do think there are some anomalies financially that make me wonder whether this is a viable proposal, and therefore I support Councillor Lindsay's decision to ask for this to be discussed in closed session. Thank you very much.
Can I assume that's a formal seconding?
You may.
Yeah. Councillor Claire Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Strictly speaking, I'm not the local member because I'm South Water North, but I would like to just say that I support we need to go into confidential session because the finances are key to this. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher, I know you've got a question, so
it's sort of a point of order or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, or a query, yes.
Yes.
I think that the finances are extremely important, but there are other issues here which have been clearly laid out by the objectors. I think it's extremely important that the public get to hear the other matters too, any discussion on them. So I'd just like to ask that as you go into and out of public session, that we ensure the bits that are not to do with finance can be heard in public, please.
I must say I would agree with that, and therefore I think we should do that before we go into closed session. Can I just take some advice on that, please?
Yes, sorry. Yes, I would recommend that you discuss the matters that can be discussed before the public now, and then we'll go into confidential session at the end of that discussion.
Right, thank you. Is that all
look
right?
at the finances.
Yeah, is that all right, Councillor Lindsay? We'll go into closed session after the main discussion.
Yeah, it just takes me minutes to find my mute thing, right? Yeah, fine.
Okay. Right, so can we have some hands up for those who want some questions? Councillor Fletcher, I know you do, so would you like to go before any more hands come up? And there are none at the moment, are there?
Thank you very much. Shipley Windmill is an incredibly important part of our heritage. It's recognised as being a Grade 2 star, and unlike many architectural gems, its historic value isn't just because of its beauty, it's because of the way it works, and it's part of industrial history. So although the engine shed is pretty much just a shed, it's really important to understanding the context and the operation of the thing. So I think, to me, it seems that the harm that is being done by supposedly converting what's a very flimsy structure, is actually quite substantial, because it's important how the thing operates. So I would really question whether that is question the judgment that there is that it's not substantial harm that's being caused, and the conversion would substantially make it harder to bring back the use of the engine machinery as previously done. So I put a huge amount of weight on the objection by SPAB Mills section. I also would question whether whether you can actually secure the future of the building in this way, regardless of the exact details of the mortgage and finance, because it's not just a matter of a certain amount per month that comes from a mortgage. So I'd just like to flag, without going into the details now, that I think that's a significant concern. I think it's really, really sad that we're not looking at alternative models of running this, as previously had worked and many people appear to be interested in. So I have very, very grave concerns about this.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Brian Donnelly.
I agree with what Councillor Fletcher has just said. I think that it'll be such a shame to lose such an asset. I think the National Planning Policy Framework would find strongly in favour of retaining it as a heritage item. I know it is a bit of a weighted debate vis-a-vis the applicant and the heritage factors. However, I think the heritage factors are far, far stronger. I agree with Councillor Stannard that it's such a shame that the trust was dissolved. I think that trust was working pretty well, and funding did appear to be coming forth in order to maintain it. And funding is a very important part. I thought that the representations on page 31 by the Sussex Industrial Archaeology and the Sussex Mills Group are very, very powerful. I think it's very hard to argue against them. Just as a small aside, you know, I find a lot of those types of units are very good at, you know, coming up with a lot of suggestions, but no money. It would be wonderful if they had said there that they'd prepared to assist with finance in the future. However, that's another matter. I don't really believe that this site or this windmill would be saved if it went into the manner in which the applicant wishes to take it. I just can't believe that any tenants would be interested in having open days for a bunch of strangers to wander around in their vicinity. And I just think that it is such a tragedy that this situation has been allowed to occur. This site, by the way, of course, is an important asset to Horsham District Council's or Horsham District's tourism industry. I know lots of people who've been there from all parts of the country, and they enjoyed it. So yes, I would think voting against this appears sensible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Tricia Utan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I agree with both Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Donnelly. It is an extremely important part of our heritage and our history. It should be preserved at all costs. But I do have a query. When was the trust dissolved? Was that recently? And also I'd like to know what advantages the trust actually showed to the owners of this property, please.
Can anyone answer that question? No.
Page 32.
I'll have a go, yeah.
The trust was, I understand from the chat, the trust was dissolved in 2009.
Okay, thank you. Was that your question, or did you want to come back, Councillor Utan?
No, sorry, I mean that's one part, but I'd like to know what exactly the trust were doing in order to maintain the windmill and its engine room, which is an integral part of it, obviously.
And I see the head of development wants to come in, so I'll call her next. Emma.
Thank you. I've got a big hand on my screen. Just to point out, obviously members can consider, you know, whether alternative viable options have been considered as part of this proposal, but we do need to consider the proposal before us rather than the benefits or disbenefits of a trust. So I think we just need to be mindful of that. The proposal before us is that I've suggested that a trust is not an option. So we need to consider whether options have been explored, but not explicitly whether a trust is the route that should be taken. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just say that was not the route I was going down. I was just wondering, out of curiosity, what it was that the trust actually did, what sort of performance. So I'm not suggesting any deviation from this at all. I'd just like further background. Thank you.
I just need to explain to Councillor Philip Baxter that I'm afraid you've had your thing, and I can't let you come back again. But Councillor Gordon Lindsay's waving, so I suspect he'll be able to answer the question. But can I please ask you all to stick with the items, with the agenda, rather than go off too much? Councillor Lindsay, I'll bring you in next.
Tricia, the trust actually maintained the windmill and kept it working, and that's simple. That's what it did. And since then, no work's been done in the windmill, so it's not working, right?
Okay, that's all right. No, the next person is Councillor Ian Stannard.
Thank you. Notwithstanding any concerns that I may have regarding finance, I would like to echo the comments made by the other councillors that there are, to my mind, some serious concerns about the fact that the windmill will be lost as an asset, and I agree that the current building is so flimsy that it actually is quite a substantial effort to rebuild it. I can't imagine anybody wanted to move into what looks like a shed. But there we are. I suppose that's secondary. But I wanted to go on record as saying I share many of the concerns of the local residents about this. And again, I think it's a great shame that the trust option has not been seen to be possible for whatever reason.
Well, I've got no more hands up, although Councillor Vickers was up, but it's gone again. Did it go by mistake, or did you take it down? You're muted, Councillor Vickers.
I did have it up and I put it down again because I didn't want to prolong the discussion about the previous activities of the trust. But as a trustee, I would just confirm that when there was a trust in place, English Heritage gave huge grants to keep the maintenance of the building going. And that was one of the benefits of having a trust. And there was a huge number of volunteers who worked extremely hard to keep the mill going. So that was the benefit of it. Just to add on to what other members have said, I think it's an important Grade 2 starred listed building. It is a unique smock mill. I find it very hard to believe that there are no other alternatives to maintaining it. I sympathise with the applicants in wanting to get funds to repair it and to keep it going forward for the future, but I still need convincing that the finances stack up. So thank you, Chairman.
Right, well, I've got no other hands up, so we have had a proposal from Councillor Lindsay that was seconded by Councillor Stannard, so to go into session, into a private session, and private's not the word I'm looking for, confidential session. And just to explain to the people who are all here joining us, you will be asked to come back again for the decision and to hear the reasons for the decisions. If that's all right, I understand you all get put in a waiting room now. So see you later. Do we wait while they go into the waiting? Will you tell us when they're in?
Chairman, if the Democratic Services Officer could read out the resolution.
I'll do that now.
In
Okay.
full.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
I thought we had to wait for the waiting room.
Okay, I'm ready to, yes, I'm ready to read it out. So on behalf of the chairman, I move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the rest of this item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. And in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.
Thank you. Well, formally, I'm going to say that I move as has just been read out to you. Can I ask if there's anybody who doesn't agree? Would you put your hand up? Otherwise, I'm going to take it as agreed. Right, that's fine. That is agreed then. We'll go into confidential session.
National Planning Policy Framework, which gives great weight to the conservation of heritage assets in a manner appropriate to their significance. I think everybody appears agreeable that we have substantial questions over the financial viability of the applicant's project. And stemming from that, I think we can make a fair estimate that in actual fact, this asset, this heritage asset, will probably just deteriorate ad infinitum until it probably falls down, and then there'll be a planning application perhaps to build a larger property there. So I think, as I say, on the MPPF and the financial side, the ability to maintain the asset would be the grounds for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Fletcher, your hand's not up, but I believe you wanted to make a comment or ask a question.
Thank you. I broadly support what Councillor Donnelly is saying here. I think that there are two issues. There is what I consider to be substantial harm to the heritage value of this particularly special windmill and associated engine room, and the lack of suitability of the proposed financial plan to secure its future. So maybe the wording of a motion to refuse could look at the balance between the harm done to the heritage and the lack that does not justify, is not justified by the financial plan, because the financial plan is not enough to secure the future of the building and justify the harm that will occur. So perhaps the officers could comment on that.
Can I ask for a comment from one of the planning officers?
I think obviously, as has been mentioned, some of the comments from our consultee suggest that it's less than substantial harm, but even less than substantial harm can warrant a refusal on planning grounds if it's considered that the benefits do not outweigh the harm. Less than substantial harm is just a sliding scale, but any harm to a listed building, it could essentially result in a refusal if there's not benefits to outweigh that. Apologies, Councillor Fletcher, was there a second part to your question?
Well, I think I'm accepting that it should be that the balance is in favour of refusal here because of the benefits and the harms. So thank you.
Councillor Claire Vickers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've listened to everybody's comments, and I'd just like to say that I want to see this windmill repaired and maintained. And I do thank the applicants for agreeing to open their windmill on Heritage Open Days. However, I don't believe it's been demonstrated the development will enable a financial viable solution to secure its future. and it will not provide sufficient public benefit that outweighs the identified harm. And whilst it may not be substantial, there is definitely harm, and I think everybody acknowledges that. So this is definitely contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 193, and Horsham District Planning Framework Policy 34. I also don't think it's been demonstrated that all other options have been fully investigated for funding. So in the absence of that information, I propose that we refuse this application. Thank you.
And do you have a seconder for that?
Am I allowed to second it if I'm not allowed to vote because of the technicality of my internet connection?
I would have thought it's probably better if you didn't. I'm not saying you're allowed to, but
Yeah.
I
agree there,
I'll second it.
Yeah, I thought that's fine. So that's proposed and seconded for a refusal, but I think I'm seeing other hands here, apart from Councillor Stannard.
I'll take my hand down now, thank you.
Okay. So it has been proposed and seconded. Does anybody else want to make that this is refused? Perhaps we ought to just go through the grounds once more. Councillor Vickers or the legal department, which...
Sorry, Chairman. What did you say?
Before I take a vote on a refusal, can you come back with the reasons so we all know exactly what we're voting on at the end of the day?
Would you like me to read it out, Chairman?
Yes, please.
It has not been demonstrated that development will enable a financially viable solution to secure the future conservation of the heritage asset, and therefore the proposal cannot demonstrate that it will provide sufficient public benefit that will outweigh the identified harm to this important designated heritage asset. This is contrary to National Planning Policy Framework paragraph 193 and Horsham District Planning Framework Policy 34. It also has not been demonstrated that all other options have been fully explored for funding. In the absence of such, the proposal is not considered to be justified for partial conversion of this building, which would create identified harm.
And that has been proposed, seconded by Councillor Lindsay. We'll take a vote on that now, and those in favour will agree. Those who are not in favour will disagree, and anybody abstaining will abstain. So when you're ready, can we have the vote, please?
Yes, right. So this is to refuse.
This is to refuse.
To refuse on the grounds as set out by Councillor Vickers.
Yes.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton. Councillor Britton.
For.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Cornell. Councillor Cornell. Councillor Costin.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haigh.
For.
Councillor Hogburn.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landieu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
Aye.
Councillor Milne.
For.
Councillor Minto.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Stannard. You have to abstain, I understand.
Abstain,
Yeah.
yes, unfortunately.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Walters.
For.
And Councillor Utan.
For.
That is 24 in favour of refusing and the 1 abstention. So the motion to refuse is carried.
Right, that's DC 20-0321 is refused. In the light of that, do we need to take the next one? Again, I'm looking for advice, or does that sort of rather lose its purpose?
You will need to take a second vote.
Right, thank you very much. And again, that is presumably to refuse. Better be to get it correct, we better have a proposal and seconder for that. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Vickers, you're going to do it again.
Happy to be consistent, Chairman.
Yeah. And Councillor Lindsay?
I guess so, yes.
Yep. Can I just double check, as listed building consent, can it be exactly the same reasons for refusal?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, okay, right, so here we are. So this is to refuse on the same grounds as the previous one. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton. Councillor Britton. Councillor Karen.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. Councillor Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Cornell. Councillor Costin. For. Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Landieu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
For.
Councillor Minto.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Stannard.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Utan.
For.
Thank you. So that's 24 in favour of refusal and 1 abstention.
Do you put in Councillor Cornell, who was on the call, as absent or abstaining?
I just didn't include him in the number at the total.
Fine, that's all right. So that is also refused. So that's fine. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think I believe there was one more item on the agenda. Yes, appendix. Do we have to do anything about that, or is it just for information? Number 8, which was covered under exempt, presumably, was it?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. There's no urgent business, so I'll say thank you very much to everybody, and see you all, no doubt, on the screen for the next meeting. Thank you very much.